Thank you for watching. Comment any ideas you would like to see in future videos. I'll do my best. Be sure to vote for your favorite merch design. I hope the music was to your liking. Please support the channel so I can afford to branch into other art content and maybe gaming. When one door closes, another opens. White phosphorus munition. White phosphorus munitions are weapons that use one of the common allotropes of the chemical element phosphorus. White phosphorus is used in smoke, illumination, and incendiary munitions, and is commonly the burning element of tracer ammunition. Other common names for white phosphorus munitions include WP and the slang terms Willie Pete and Willie Peter, which are derived from William Peter, the World War II phonetic alphabet rendering of the letters WP. White phosphorus is pyrophoric. It is ignited by contact with air, burns fiercely, and can ignite cloth, fuel, ammunition, and other combustibles. White phosphorus is a highly efficient smoke-producing agent, reacting with air to produce an immediate blanket of phosphorus pentoxide vapor. History. Early use. White phosphorus was used by Fenian, Irish nationalist, arsonists in the 19th century in a formulation that became known as Fenian fire. The phosphorus would be in a solution of carbon disulfide. When the carbon disulfide evaporates, the phosphorus bursts into flames. The same formula was also used in arson in Australia. World War I, the interwar period, and World War II. The British Army introduced the first factory-built white phosphorus grenades in late 1916 during the First World War. During the war, white phosphorus mortar bombs, shells, rockets, and grenades were used extensively by American, Commonwealth, and Japanese forces, in both smoke-generating and anti-personnel roles. The Royal Air Force based in Iraq also used white phosphorus bombs in Anbar province during the Iraqi Revolt of 1920. Among the many social groups protesting the war and conscription at the time, at least one, the industrial workers of the world in Australia, used Fenian fire. In the interwar years, the U.S. Army trained using white phosphorus, by artillery shell and air bombardment. In 1940, when the German invasion of Great Britain seemed imminent, the phosphorus firm of Albright and Wilson suggested that the British government use a material similar to Fenian fire in several expedient incendiary weapons. The only one fielded was the grenade, number 76 or special incendiary phosphorus grenade, which consisted of a glass bottle filled with a mixture similar to Fenian fire, plus some latex. It came in two versions, one with a red cap intended to be thrown by hand, and a slightly stronger bottle with a green cap, intended to be launched from the north-over projector, a crude 64 mm, 2.5 in launcher using black powder as a propellant. These were improvised anti-tank weapons, hastily fielded in 1940 when the British were awaiting a potential German invasion after losing the bulk of their modern armaments in the Dunkirk evacuation. At the start of the Normandy campaign, 20% of American 81mm mortar ammunition consisted of M57 point detonating bursting smoke rounds using WP filler. At least 5 American Medal of Honor citations mention their recipients using M15 white phosphorus hand grenades to clear enemy positions, and in the 1944 liberation of Cherbourg alone, a single U.S. mortar battalion, the 87th, fired 11,899 white phosphorus rounds into the city. The U.S. Army and Marines used M2 and M328 WP shells in 107 mm, 4.2 in mortars. White phosphorus was widely used by Allied soldiers for breaking up German attacks and creating havoc among enemy troop concentrations during the latter part of the war. U.S. Sherman tanks carried the M64, a 75 mm white phosphorus round intended for screening and artillery spotting, but tank crews found it useful against German tanks such as the Panther that their APC ammunition could not penetrate at long range. Smoke from rounds fired directly at German tanks would be used to blind them, allowing the Shermans to close to a range where their armor-piercing rounds were effective. In addition, due to the turret ventilation system sucking in fumes, German crews would sometimes be forced to abandon their vehicle. This proved particularly effective against inexperienced crews who, on seeing smoke inside the turret, would assume their tank had caught fire. Smoke was also used for silhouetting enemy vehicles, with rounds dropped behind them to produce a better contrast for gunnery. Later 20th century uses. White phosphorus munitions were used extensively by U.S. forces in Vietnam and by Russian forces in the First Chechen War and Second Chechen War. White phosphorus grenades were used by the U.S. in Vietnam to destroy Viet Cong tunnel complexes, as they would burn up all oxygen and suffocate the enemy soldiers sheltering inside. British soldiers also made extensive use of white phosphorus grenades during the Falklands War to clear out Argentine positions, as the peaty soil they were constructed on tended to lessen the impact of fragmentation grenades. Use by U.S. forces in Iraq. In November 2004, during the Second Battle of Fallujah, Washington Post reporters embedded with Task Force 222, Regimental Combat Team 7 stated that they witnessed artillery guns firing white phosphorus projectiles, which create a screen of fire that cannot be extinguished with water. Insurgents reported being attacked with a substance that melted their skin, a reaction consistent with white phosphorus burns. The same article also reported, the corpses of the mujahedin which we received were burned, and some corpses were melted. The March/April 2005 issue of an official Army publication called Field Artillery Magazine reported that white phosphorus proved to be an effective and versatile munition and a potent psychological weapon against the insurgents in trench lines and spider holes. We fired shake and bake missions at the insurgents using WP, white phosphorus, to flush them out, and HE, high explosives, to take them out. The documentary Fallujah, The Hidden Massacre, produced by Rai TV and released November 8, 2005, showed video and photos that they claimed to be of Fallujah combatants and also civilians, including women and children, who had died of burns caused by white phosphorus during the Second Battle of Fallujah. On November 15, 2005, following denials to the press from the U.S. ambassadors in London and Rome, the U.S. Department of Defense confirmed that U.S. forces had used white phosphorus as an incendiary weapon in Fallujah, in order to drive combatants out of dug-in positions. On November 22, 2005, the Iraqi government stated it would investigate the use of white phosphorus in the Battle of Fallujah. On November 30, 2005, the BBC quoted U.S. General Peter Pace saying it is not a chemical weapon. It is an incendiary. And it is well within the law of war to use those weapons as they're being used, for marking and for screening. Professor Paul Rogers from the University of Bradford Department of Peace and Conflict Studies said that white phosphorus would probably fall into the category of chemical weapons if it was used directly against people. Use by Israeli forces in Lebanon. 2006 Lebanon War. During the 2006 Lebanon War, Israel said that it had used phosphorus shells against military targets in open ground in southern Lebanon. Israel said that its use of these munitions was permitted under international conventions. However, President of Lebanon Emil Lahad said that phosphorus shells were used against civilians. The first Lebanese official complaint about the use of phosphorus came from Information Minister Ghazi Aridi. 2023 Israel, Lebanon border clashes. Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch accused Israel of using white phosphorus artillery shells indiscriminately in its attack in Deira, Lebanon on October 16, that injured at least 9 civilians, and that it was unlawful. Amnesty is investigating this and other potential violations of international humanitarian law by all parties in the region. The claim was confirmed by the Washington Post, which identified 2 white phosphorus shell casings made in the United States. By March 6, the National Council for Scientific Research in Lebanon said 117 white phosphorus bombs had been dropped on southern Lebanon. Israel says that they have been using the substance to create a smoke screen on the battlefield. However, it has been alleged that its use was an attempt by Israel to make the land uninhabitable in the future. Use by Israeli forces in Gaza. In its early statements regarding the Gaza War of 2008 to 2009, the Israeli military denied using WP entirely, saying the IDF acts only in accordance with what is permitted by international law and does not use white phosphorus. However, numerous reports from human rights groups during the war indicated that WP shells were being used by Israeli forces in populated areas. On January 5, 2009, The Times of London reported that telltale smoke associated with white phosphorus had been seen in the vicinity of Israeli shelling. On January 12, it was reported that more than 50 patients in Nasser Hospital were being treated for phosphorus burns. On January 15, the headquarters of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency in Gaza City was struck by IDF white phosphorus artillery shells, setting fire to pallets of relief materials and igniting several large fuel storage tanks. Senior Israeli defense officials maintain that the shelling was in response to Israeli military personnel being fired upon by Hamas fighters who were in proximity to the UN headquarters, and was used for smoke. The soldiers who ordered the attack were later reprimanded for violating the IDF rules of engagement. The IDF further investigated improper use of WP in the conflict, particularly in one incident in which 20 WP shells were fired in a built-up area of Beit Lahia. After the Israel Defense Forces had officially denied for months having used white phosphorus during the war, the Israeli government released a report in July 2009 that confirmed that the IDF had used white phosphorus in both exploding munitions and smoke projectiles. The report argues that the use of these munitions was limited to unpopulated areas for marking and signaling and not as an anti-personnel weapon. The Israeli government report further stated that smoke screening projectiles were the majority of the munitions containing white phosphorus employed by the IDF and that these were very effective in that role. The report states that at no time did IDF forces have the objective of inflicting any harm on the civilian population. Head of the UN fact-finding mission Justice Richard Goldstone presented the report of the mission to the Human Rights Council in Geneva on September 29, 2009. The Goldstone report accepted that white phosphorus is not illegal under international law but did find that the Israelis were systematically reckless in determining its use in built-up areas. It also called for serious consideration to be given to the banning of its use in built-up areas. The government of Israel issued an initial response rejecting the findings of the Goldstone report. The 155 mm WP artillery shells used by Israel are typically the American M825A1, a base ejection shell which deploys an air-bursting submunition canister. On detonation of the bursting charge, the canister deploys 116 units 19 mm, 0.75 in, quarter-circle wedges of felt impregnated with 5.8 kilograms, 12.75 pounds, of WP, producing a smoke screen lasting 5 to 10 minutes depending on weather conditions. These submunitions typically land in an elliptical pattern 125 to 250 meters in diameter, with the size of the effect area depending on the burst height, and produce a smoke screen 10 meters in height. Afghanistan, 2009. There are confirmed cases of white phosphorus burns on bodies of civilians wounded during U.S. Taliban clashes near Bagram. The United States has accused Taliban militants of using white phosphorus weapons illegally on at least 44 occasions. On the other hand, in May 2009, Colonel Gregory Julian, a spokesman for General David McKiernan, the overall commander of U.S. and NATO forces in Afghanistan, confirmed that Western military forces in Afghanistan use white phosphorus in order to illuminate targets or as an incendiary to destroy bunkers and enemy equipment. The Afghan government later launched an investigation into the use of white phosphorus munitions. Syrian civil war. The Syrian government, the United States, the Russian Federation, and Turkey reportedly deployed white phosphorus munitions via airstrikes and artillery on different occasions during the Syrian civil war. Second Nagorno-Karabakh War. During the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War, on October 31, 2020, the Ministry of Defense of the Unrecognized Republic of Artsakh stated that the Azerbaijani side had used phosphorus weapons to burn forests near Shusha, Shusi. Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab, DFR Lab, found ascent evidence supporting these claims. The Azerbaijani authorities, in turn, accused the Armenian forces of using white phosphorus on civilian areas. On November 20, the Prosecutor General's Office of Azerbaijan filed a lawsuit, accusing the Armenian armed forces of using phosphorus ammunition in Nagorno-Karabakh, as well as in Tartar District. Regulation and application. Uses. White phosphorus ignites when interacting with oxygen, releasing a large amount of smoke during combustion. The military can use the curtain to mask troop movements. However, the chemical characteristics of the substance make phosphorus bombs especially dangerous. The burning temperature of phosphorus is 800 to 2500 degrees Celsius, it sticks to various surfaces, including skin and clothes. The burning substance is difficult to extinguish. White phosphorus can cause deep burns down to the bones, and remnants of the substance in the tissues can ignite again after the initial treatment. It is difficult for military doctors, who are usually limited by medical resources, to provide timely and full assistance to the victims. Even burn survivors can die from organ failure due to the toxicity of white phosphorus. In addition, fires caused by incendiary projectiles can destroy civilian buildings and property, and damage crops and livestock. Humanitarian organizations such as Human Rights Watch are calling on governments to include phosphorus warheads under the UN Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons. Non-governmental international organizations have recorded the military use of white phosphorus in Syria, Afghanistan, the Gaza Strip, and other war zones. Militaries worldwide, including the U.S. military, use white phosphorus for incendiary purposes. International law. White phosphorus munitions are not banned under international law, but because of their incendiary effects, their use is supposed to be tightly regulated. Because white phosphorus has legal uses, shells filled with it are not directly prohibited by international humanitarian law. Experts consider them not as incendiary, but as masking, since their main goal is to create a smoke screen. While in general white phosphorus is not subject to restriction, certain uses in weaponry are banned or restricted by general international laws, in particular, those related to incendiary devices. Article 1 of Protocol 3 of the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons defines an incendiary weapon as any weapon or munition which is primarily designed to set fire to objects or to cause burn injury to persons through the action of flame, heat, or combination thereof, produced by a chemical reaction of a substance delivered on the target. Article 2 of the same protocol prohibits the deliberate use of incendiary weapons against civilian targets, already forbidden by the Geneva Conventions, the use of air-delivered incendiary weapons against military targets in civilian areas, and the general use of other types of incendiary weapons against military targets located within concentrations of civilians without taking all possible means to minimize casualties. Incendiary phosphorus bombs may also not be used near civilians in a way that can lead to indiscriminate civilian casualties. The Convention also exempts certain categories of munitions from its definition of incendiary weapons. Specifically, these are munitions which may have incidental incendiary effects, such as illuminants, tracers, smoke, or signaling systems, and those designed to combine penetration, blast or fragmentation effects with an additional incendiary effect. The use of incendiary and other flame weapons against materiel, including enemy military personnel, is not directly forbidden by any treaty. The United States military mandates that incendiary weapons, where deployed, not be used in such a way as to cause unnecessary suffering. The term unnecessary suffering is defined through use of a proportionality test, comparing the anticipated military advantage of the weapons used to the amount of suffering potentially caused. Chemical weaponry. Despite their danger, the Chemical Weapons Convention does not classify phosphorus bombs as chemical weapons. This convention is meant to prohibit weapons that are dependent on the use of the toxic properties of chemicals as a method of warfare, and defines a toxic chemical as a substance which through its chemical action on life processes can cause death, temporary incapacitation or permanent harm to humans or animals. An annex lists chemicals that are restricted under the convention, and WP is not listed in the schedules of chemical weapons or precursors. In a 2005 interview with Peter Kaiser, spokesman for the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons, an organization overseeing the CWC and reporting directly to the UN General Assembly, discussed cases where use of WP would potentially fall under the auspices of the CWC. No, it's not forbidden by the CWC if it is used within the context of a military application that does not require or does not intend to use the toxic properties of white phosphorus. White phosphorus is normally used to produce smoke, to camouflage movement. If that is the purpose for which the white phosphorus is used, then that is considered under the convention legitimate use. If on the other hand the toxic properties of white phosphorus are specifically intended to be used as a weapon, that, of course, is prohibited, because the way the convention is structured or applied, any chemicals used against humans or animals that cause harm or death through the toxic properties of the chemical are considered chemical weapons. Smoke screening properties. Weight for weight, phosphorus is the most effective smoke screening agent known, for two reasons. First, it absorbs most of the screening mass from the surrounding atmosphere, and secondly, the smoke particles are actually an aerosol, a mist of liquid droplets which are close to the ideal range of sizes for scattering of visible light. This effect has been likened to three-dimensional textured privacy glass. The smoke cloud does not obstruct an image, but thoroughly scrambles it. It also absorbs infrared radiation, allowing it to defeat thermal imaging systems. When phosphorus burns in air, it first forms phosphorus pentoxide, which exists as tetraphosphorus dicoxide except at very high temperatures. P4 plus 5 O2 equals P4O10. However, phosphorus pentoxide is extremely hygroscopic and quickly absorbs even minute traces of moisture to form liquid droplets of phosphoric acid. P4O10 plus 6 H2O equals 4 H3PO4 also forms polyphosphoric acids such as pyrophosphoric acid, H4P2O7. Since an atom of phosphorus has an atomic mass of 31 but a molecule of phosphoric acid has a molecular mass of 98, the cloud is already 68% by mass derived from the atmosphere, i.e., 3.2 kilograms of smoke for every kilogram of WP. However, it may absorb more because phosphoric acid and its variants are hygroscopic. Given time, the droplets will continue to absorb more water, growing larger and more dilute until they reach equilibrium with the local water vapor pressure. In practice, the droplets quickly reach a range of sizes suitable for scattering visible light and then start to dissipate from wind or convection. Because of the great weight efficiency of WP smoke, it is particularly suited for applications where weight is highly restricted, such as hand grenades and mortar bombs. An additional advantage for hand smoke grenades, which are more likely to be used in an emergency, is that the WP smoke clouds form in a fraction of a second. Because WP is also pyrophoric, most munitions of this type have a simple burster charge to split open the casing and spray fragments of WP through the air, where they ignite spontaneously and leave a trail of rapidly thickening smoke behind each particle. The appearance of this cloud forming is easily recognized. One sees a shower of burning particles spraying outward, followed closely by distinctive streamers of white smoke, which rapidly coalesce into a fluffy, very pure white cloud, unless illuminated by a colored light source. Various disadvantages of WP are discussed below, but one which is particular to smoke screening is pillaring. Because the WP smoke is formed from fairly hot combustion, the gases in the cloud are hot, and tend to rise. Consequently, the smoke screen tends to rise off the ground relatively quickly and form aerial pillars of smoke which are of little use for screening. Tactically, this may be counteracted by using WP to get a screen quickly, but then following up with emission-type screening agents for a more persistent screen. Some countries have begun using red phosphorus instead. Red phosphorus burns cooler than WP and eliminates a few other disadvantages as well, but offers exactly the same weight efficiency. Other approaches include WP-soaked felt pads, which also burn more slowly, and pose a reduced risk of incendiarism, and PWP, or plasticized white phosphorus. Plasticized white phosphorus. White phosphorus, when dispersed by the bursting charge, tends to become too finely divided. The reaction then becomes too fast, releases too much heat at once, and the smoke cloud rises up. After series of experiments, in 1944 the NDRC Munitions Development Laboratory at University of Illinois developed a plasticization method. The white phosphorus granules, big about as grains of sand, are coated with GRS, government rubber styrene, rubber, gelled with xylene. The resulting rubbery mass does not atomize so readily, gets broken up to several millimeters sized pieces, and burns for several minutes, reducing the pillaring. However, incendiary effects are reduced too, albeit the larger pieces are more effective against enemy troops. One of the disadvantages of PWP is the tendency of phosphorus to separate from the rubber matrix, when stored in hot weather. Physiological effects. In addition to direct injuries caused by fragments of their casings, white phosphorus munitions can cause injuries in two main ways: burn injuries and vapor inhalation. Burning. In munitions, white phosphorus burns readily with flames of 800 degrees Celsius, 1472 degrees Fahrenheit. Incandescent particles from weapons using powdered white phosphorus as their payload produce extensive partial and full thickness burns, as will any attempt to handle burning submunitions without protective equipment. Phosphorus burns carry an increased risk of mortality due to the absorption of phosphorus into the body through the burned area with prolonged contact, which can result in liver, heart, and kidney damage, and in some cases multiple organ failure. White phosphorus particles continue to burn until completely consumed or starved of oxygen. In the case of weapons using felt-impregnated submunitions, incomplete combustion may occur, resulting in up to 15% of the WP content remaining unburned. Such submunitions can prove hazardous as they are capable of spontaneous reignition if crushed by personnel or vehicles. Comment any ideas you would like to see in future videos. I'll do my best. Like, subscribe, and ring that bell. Thank you for watching. Comment any ideas you would like to see in future videos. I'll do my best. Be sure to vote for your favorite merch design. I hope the music was to your liking. Please support the channel so I can afford to branch into other art content and maybe gaming.
Hello. Thank you for watching the video. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you have any suggestions for future content, comment and let me know. I know many are not comfortable with AI art, but I am saving to gather supplies to delve into other art styles. It will take time, but I am hoping to get into resin, woodworking, and metalworking. All I ask, please enjoy my videos.